He talks a good game. He talks a good game. On the Edson, he talks a good game.
Hello, welcome to On the Edson. I hope you're all well. Hey, listen, I've been away. I've been away for a few days. Very, very busy doing other stuff. Really important. Life stuff. And I thought, well, I'll come back and make a video, do a live show about, the transfer window. It's closed. Lots of coming and goings. West Ham, my team, your team if you're a West Ham fan, of course. Lots of issues going on there. Lots to dig into there as well. But I'm just going to start this off in terms of the transfer window. Whoever you support, have you made the signings that you really wanted? Of those signings that have come in, are you happy with them, right? Or are there players that you think, oh, you know what, I think they could have done a job for us. Why didn't we go after them? I've just been reading a story here, and this kind of, I'm not sure if I ever talked about it in the past, but I'm sure I've mentioned him. I certainly thought about him. Celtic are trying to, under Martin O'Neill's leadership right now, of course, because he's stepped into the fray again to try and settle the ship. They're possibly in talks or interested in signing Oxlade-Chamberlain, obviously Arsenal fame, Liverpool fame. He went off to Besiktas in Turkey, and then he terminated his contract in the summer. So he's been a free agent ever since, and he's not been able to get a club. Now, I was of the thought, well, if he's fit, there's no problem. I'm surprised that nobody's come in for him. He's only 32 years old. Well, so he's a decent player. I was actually wondering for, West Ham, why didn't we go in for something like that? Just to fill in some gaps and just to, add to the squad, let's say. Another English player, it all adds to, and especially he's a quality player. Now, of course, there's lots of ifs and buts here. Why, is he the kind of player that, anybody really wants? But in terms of being a quality, I'm very interested that it only seems that Celtic now are interested in getting him. Now, of course, it depends how much he wants and where is he at mentally. We take the likes of Jesse Lingard, for example. There are talks of him trying to come back to the Premier League after his little holiday in Rio, wherever it was he went to, failed again. So his career's all over the place. And there's lots of players that are out there. You think, could you just use them for a few months to do a job for you? Or maybe even a couple of years, right? As a West Ham fan, we had our much reservations about Callum Wilson coming to us at the start of the season. Seems old. Does he have the legs? And also the kinds of goals that he scored against us in the past. Lots of fans who think, oh God, don't really like this guy, right? But at the same time, he's come in and he's done quite a decent job for us. So you kind of look at teams that have made signings but also let players go, and you wonder, well, is this good for a player's career or bad for a player's career? Mateta from Crystal Palace, he was supposed to be going off to AC Milan. They found a problem with his knee, so God knows what's going to happen now. Well, he's obviously staying at Crystal Palace, but what's that going to be for his future? West Ham has signed a couple of players coming in. They just got Diaz on loan from Chelsea as well. You're hoping that these players come in the January transfer window and they hit the ground running. We signed a couple of players right at the start of the transfer window, Pablo and Tati, as strikers, but they're not scoring goals, right? And you kind of wonder, well, are they going to be quality strikers? Well, loads of players go. And you kind of wonder, well, they weren't going to feature. We didn't really like them. They cut the wage bill. This is all good stuff in terms of business, but we're not really replacing them. We're not really replacing with a lot of players. So you kind of wonder, well, what is going on here? And this could be the same for your team as well. There could be lots of other teams out there who or clubs who are trying to buy players. And you as a fan, you're probably wondering, well, is this any good? Or are they going to be able to do a job for us? Have we spent too much money in the January transfer window? I've always said this, that January transfer signings are bad signings. In terms financially, they're bad. They never make any sense to me. The problem is that you get to a point and it's desperation stakes. So you need something. You need something, an injection, into the club. You need something to help save the club. So you kind of wonder, okay, especially those either at the top of the table or the bottom of the table, in terms of, are these signings going to change your fortunes? Okay, if you're in the mid-table, are they going to keep you there? Are they going to make any difference? Are you able to climb a little bit, or actually overall, does it upset the balance of the squad, of the dressing room, and just drag you down? We've seen that happen so many times before, and it's at the end of the day, it's a punt, right? It's the end of the day, you don't really know until you get those players in. The problem is when you got clubs that they're not run in harmony. They're not, the manager, the coaching, the ownership, the structure of the club isn't in harmony. Then all of a sudden you get various different elements pulling in different directions and also thinking that they know best. So case in point, you could have a manager who's forced to take on a player, or a coach who's forced to take on a player that they don't really want, that they don't really like the look of. But on paper, they are a great player, right? So all of a sudden what happens is that the club buy this player and the manager can't work with them. They can't get anything out of them. They don't fancy them. They don't think they can do a good job. So let me just bring it back to West Ham, where who I'm a high support. And you kind of wonder, well, the players that we've bought in and the players that we've let go, are we in a better position? If you look out at some of the West Ham media, West Ham channels this week, I think there's been a difference in reaction, not only in terms of our performances and our results, losing to Chelsea, losing from a 2-0 lead at half-time, and conceding 3 goals in the second. So there's been a different reaction to that. Some people are really pissed off. Some people are actually really positive, surprisingly positive of the kind of football that we've played. There's also the kind of football and results that we've been getting in the last 2 games. This is what I've always said, though. Sometimes performances are fantastic. That's what you always factor on. But there comes a point where performance are kind of secondary, because the only thing that matters is results. The only thing that matters is results. And the players that you get in, transfers in, or the players that you let go, have got to affect the results. Because if they don't affect the results, ultimately, they're not really doing anything for you as a club. However, our performances have got better. That first half performance against Chelsea was fantastic. 55 odd minutes, doing great stuff, right? And then you kind of wonder, well, regardless of what these players that are coming in or we've let go, what's the manager actually doing with them? This has always been my concern with Nuno, or the likes of Nuno, and say, what is he actually doing with these players? What is he actually doing with them? How is he coaching them? What is the strategy here? What is the in-game tactics? So time and time again, you get players that are coming in. The business has been done. We got these players in. We think that we've got this new strategy. Maybe it seems as if a lot of the play is kind of 4-4-2. Not strictly 4-4-2, but there's 2 players in these 2 new signings that are up there, occupying space. Not really sure. A lot of fans, and myself included, are kind of wondering, well, how effective are they up there? But we've changed it a little bit. The dynamic seems to be better. We've got a couple of players that have come back into form, the likes of Somerville, Bowen. We've got a couple of players that are obviously gone. James Ward-Prowse, Burnley, he wasn't being played anyway, so that's gone. Paqueta's gone to Flamengo. He also, in his first game, they're playing a cup game. I'm sure you've seen this, and he misses a sitter from 6 yards out. So that's welcome home, Paqueta. So it hasn't been a bed of roses for him going back there, but he wasn't playing well for us at the time, and there's lots of arguments and lots of reasons for that. So in terms of settling the ship and playing better football, we seem by hook or by crook, by accident or by method, we seem to be playing better football for certain parts of the game. Then all of a sudden, the manager interjects again. He has to add his little bit of seasoning on the game just so he's affecting the game in his own way. So it's his management of the players, the management of the signings, the management of the game as well, and also how he perceives what the opposition are going to do. I always wonder with managers, because you could look at it in two different ways. Is that the manager can see there's a flow of the game is starting to change. You can see his own players that might be starting to make mistakes, might be starting to tire a little bit. He thinks, right, I need to shore this up a little bit. I need to change the tactics. And we can all see that. We can all acknowledge it. We can all appreciate that. But sometimes they change things for change's sake when change is not required. And I feel this with Nuno, with West Ham manager, and you probably see this with other managers as well, that they're making changes when the change isn't absolutely required, when there's still time to keep on playing on the front foot. I don't know if I've ever said this on one of my videos or whatever. If I go back to my school days, go back to when I was a primary school lad, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it was, used to play football for the school team. So we had a headmaster at the time who always took PE and took football and ran the school football team. And he would arrange games with other local teams, local football teams, schools, I should say. But any time we were playing, whether in, PE lessons, whatever it was, or whether playing against another team, I'll never forget this, and it's stuck with me for my whole life. Let's just say we would score, right? We would score. He would always say, "Fantastic! Now let's get another one." His whole mentality was, "Brilliant! We scored a goal. Let's go and get another one." And sometimes we'd be stopping teams 4, 5, 6-0, and he'd say exactly the same thing again. "That's great! Now let's get another one. Let's get another one." So what that shows me, that there's a mentality to say, regardless of what we're doing, we've got to keep on the same path because it's working. We've got to keep on striving to do this again, repeat this again, get better again. But so many times managers, in the modern game especially, but managers seem to forget that. They seem to say, right, we've got a 2-0 lead now. Let's just hold that. Let's just hold it. Right? But the thing is, everything that's made you successful for 60 minutes, 50, 60 minutes, even 45 minutes, is the fact that you've been going forward, trying to repeat one goal after another, trying to get another one. Let's do it again. Then you get to a point and say, well, you abandon that. Now you want to consolidate and say, let's not concede. Let's hold off. Now, I always think that kind of mentality is okay with 5 minutes to go. With 10 minutes to go, I get it. It also depends on if you've got injuries, or depends if you've had a player sent off and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of factors to consider. But all things being equal, all things being good, all things working in your favour, then you're changing tactics, and that upsets things. You can change tactics in terms of changing the players, let's say. But sometimes what you're doing is that you're taking off attack-minded players and putting on defensive-minded players. Again, that could shore up something, but it could also bring on pressure. So what Nuno tends to do is that he tends to take off strikers or take off attacking-minded players and put more players in defence. Well, what you could do, so why don't you just put defensive midfielder on? So leave the defence as it is, put the defensive midfielder on, but you're still stopping that pressure from getting to the back four. Hold it in midfield. And we don't seem to have that. We don't seem to have a manager that uses the resources for the betterment of the team, for the betterment of the club. We seem to have a manager who uses resources, players, this is, in their different positions, different favoured positions, and he's put them, and he's employing these resources at the wrong moments. So you get players coming in, Pablo, Tati, that are doing all right. They're doing okay. They're making a nuisance of themselves. They're occupying space, and that enables other players from the midfield to have a bit more space in midfield. Somerville, Fernandez, Bowen, having a bit more success now because they are not the front runner. Pablo and Tati are the front runners, so actually it enables the midfield to have a bit more space and a bit more success. So if you want to shore things up a little bit, you could either bolster midfield, or what you could do is take off one of the front two, Tati or Pablo, and put another striker, another attacker in there. So Wilson, for example, right? But you don't really do that. You favour a defensive setup first before doing that. So this is exactly the same when, let's say, West Ham played Bournemouth, 2-0 up. You changed things up. You took Wilson off for 50-odd minutes, and then invited Bournemouth to come on as we sat deeper and deeper and deeper. You got more defensively set up. You set yourself more and more defensive, and this is what happened. So then, this is the other aspect. The other aspect now is that, let me just go here, live chat, there we go. Then this is what happens here again with Chelsea. 2-0 up, playing really, really well. Yes, it wasn't all West Ham's way. Of course it wasn't. But there was a lot of good stuff. And there's a lot of great interchange of play. And there's a lot of attacking intent. They took it to Chelsea and they faltered. They weren't playing well. We were playing great, or a lot better, right? I've said this in the past. You know, West Ham are playing well when we're playing against teams who are not performing well. So this is when you have to, you know, make hay with the sunshine. And by Christ, they did it, right? Second half, yeah, you could imagine they're going to come at us a little bit more, and they're going to have their team talk. But you don't kind of abandon that way of playing. You needed to employ the resources, needed to employ the players better. So regardless of what transfers we get in, you kind of wonder, well, the manager has a great deal of influence here in not only how the games go, of course, but also how successful those players are going to be. When is he going to put them into the game? When is he going to start them? When is he going to take them off? I've never been convinced that Nuno Espirito Santo is the right manager for West Ham, because he's failed in so many different ways over various games to secure points or to give us a chance of getting better points. Granted, look, we go to Chelsea. It's a tall order as well, but it doesn't matter what you were there beforehand, what you thought of beforehand. By hook or by crook, you got in a situation you're 2-0 up at half-time. So to lose that 3-2 against a much better team with a bigger squad and everything, like quality players, are granted. But that's, and also it's not because you kept the same tactics and they just outplayed us. This is a tactical change that also led to them coming on board or getting on top. So this is one of the problems. I just wonder, you know, with the transfer business that any team has done, whether it's actually going to make a dramatic effect. And we expect these players to come in, and you know, you kind of think, well, how are they going to hit the ground running? So you've got two strikers that we bought, two forward players that we bought at the start of the transfer window. They've done okay. West Ham as a team have done better. They've started to get better and better, but it's kind of in spite of these two rather than because they're so much better, their quality. So we changed the setup to accommodate them, but that's actually, as a byproduct, enabled other players to flourish a little bit. So you could say, well, it's working. But it's not really the players, the identification of these players that are bringing in that's making them make a difference. It's the whole team making a difference. So you could say, okay, this is a Nuno thing. This is a manager thing, using these resources and the betterment of the team. Great. But then you're also taking away players and you're making bad decisions, and that's what costs us game. That costs us points, makes us draw or makes us lose points and lose a game. So when a team like West Ham or Wolves or Burnley or to a certain degree Nottingham Forest and Leeds are at the bottom of the table, they need those points. These transfers, these decisions to start players, to sub them on, sub them off, these in-game tactics are crucial. And you got a team like West Ham and Burnley and Wolves, but certainly West Ham because they're right on the edge of it, as it were, deeply stuck in relegation zone. And there's opportunities to close the gap or be in touching distance of Nottingham Forest and now Leeds, right? They're on the same point, 6 points behind. And you kind of think, well, actually, performances are great. We need performances. And I know, because I would feel to be exactly the same, why some media out there, why some YouTube channels or West Ham channels say, no, look, we're playing brilliantly, we're doing well, we've got another 14, 15 games to go, look, we can do this, look, we've got to have faith in it. This is all valid, it's all right, it's absolutely what we need to do, how we need to think. But we also need to recognise exactly where we are. We're in the bottom three. And the last couple of games, we have our gap from safety, even though we've played better, though we got a couple of wins in there as well, the gap has actually got further apart. We've gone from a 4-point to a 5-point to a 6-point deficit. And I've said this in the past, we need to win games and other teams above us need to lose their games. Now, it can still be done. Of course it can be. The transfers that we get in, they can be a roaring success. But I've always said, transfers coming in January to hit the ground running, it's so rare. It's so rare. I still think there's an opportunity for West Ham to get out-of-contract players in for the rest of the season. Oxlade-Chamberlain, if they're fit. Lingard, if they're fit, if they're able to do a job. I'm not talking about signing. I'm talking short-term contract. Can they do something? Potentially, right? Because we've let so many players go as well. So we've cut the wage bill. So the ownership isn't. We know what the owners are. We know what the owners are. I don't think they really care about the club in terms of. They care in terms of financial position, but they don't care about the club, not like fans do. They don't care about the club. But it does appear as if they're setting up for the championship, as opposed to doing everything they can to just keep things going, or to have a great chance of staying up. I'm not sure that they are doing that. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure that they're doing that. Got Burnley this weekend. Then Man United. I'll be at the United game. But it's... we go to Burnley. And I wouldn't say that they've been terrible. I wouldn't say... a lot of people are just very dismissive of Burnley, I think. I think they've put up some decent performances in recent weeks. They've had a few hiccups along the way. But they're deep in it themselves. That's going to be a tough game, going to Burnley. And the problem is, if your manager, gets the tactics wrong again or goes negative and defensive, all that would do was just encourage Burnley or any team to come on to us. Man United to be exactly the same. They will definitely come at us and they will definitely try and score goals, especially now under Carrick, their manager. Especially who the players that they've got, the direction they want to go, this new sense of freedom, this new sense of, regaining a Man United identity, I would imagine that they're going to come at us and try and prove a point. Because they want to get as many, they're in top four now, they want to get as many points as they can. So as a club like West Ham and Burnley are fighting for very different reasons than the likes of Man United, right? They're fighting for very different reasons. But a change in manager can have a dramatic effect, and it can be sustained if it's not just a manager transfer blip or bump. It's actually a change for a difference, or there's a permanent change. And it seems as if the Man United players are playing with different formation, the different intensity to go forward. Whereas under Amorim, they weren't doing that. It was haphazard at times. Formations were all over the place, a lot of confusion. Now it's very much a clear directive. And sometimes under, let's say, Nuno, there's not a clear directive. Scott Parker at Burnley, he appears to me to have a clear directive. It's just they don't have the players to be able to execute that. But there's definitely been a clear directive, right? He's a decent manager, Scotty Parker. He's not a slouch. He's a decent manager, very decent manager. Got a lot of time for him. So I think, if go to Burnley and we don't come away with a win, because the problem is we cannot afford. Teams that are in the relegation zone cannot afford to get a draw. Certainly cannot afford to get losses, right? Certainly cannot afford to get draws when other teams are also getting draws, but in worst case scenario, getting wins as well. So every time that happens, that just widens the gap, and it makes that even harder task with less and less time available. And this is what we're coming to with West Ham. It's a greater task with less and less, or should be this way really. A greater task with less time available. And it's getting to a point where it's closing, where it's beyond help. Psychologically, or certainly the way I thought about the games, the way I thought about the club, I've felt, whilst in last couple of games, apart from Chelsea, I felt there was a little bit of a bump. I felt, maybe I'm starting to question myself in terms of, can we get out of this? But the reality is, I've been thinking about this since the start of the season, that we're just not good enough. We're playing terrible football. We're all over the place. Players weren't on form. Tactics are all over the place. Successive managers have let us down. Ownership that has let us down. And it's all over the place. We're not going to get out of this. And this is where I say it. We're just not going to get out of it. And it's about transfers. It's about transfers, when you get them in the summer, and also the tactics which you employ, how you manage these transfers. Business is done. Transfer business is done. But that doesn't mean anything if the players don't perform, if the team doesn't perform, and if it's not sustained throughout 90 minutes. And this is what a lot of other fans from other teams are probably mocking a load of West Ham fans, right? Saying, a game is not 45 minutes; it is 90 minutes. No shit, Sherlock. We know that as well. And the players that you've got to be able to perform there, but the manager's got to be able to use them effectively. I'll be very interested to see how we get on. But Burnley this coming weekend, then Man United. I'll be at the United game. What can you do? You're hoping that these players that you get in, that they start to produce, they start to score goals, they make a real difference. You hope that you're not going to miss the players that you've let go. You hope that, they go on to do okay, but we as a team, or your team, whatever it is, you're not missing them. The overall performances have gone down. In fact, in January, West Ham performances have just got better. They got better. So if that's the case, they can keep on building on that. Now they got to match that performance with results. But the most important thing now is results and wins. We've been saying this for a few weeks now, but definitely if your team is in a position that they're trying to chase something, or trying to, at the bottom, trying to get out of it, wins are the only thing that matters. Everything else is just, it's irrelevant, really. If you know what to do, keep on watching. Leave a comment in the below. Sorry nobody's able to join the chat today. But listen, join another video, another live show coming very soon. Catch you again. Bye now.